Hey everybody, welcome back. Now that we've built a proper attack in our game, I want to dive into how we can start utilizing these systems. So in this video, you're going to learn how to utilize the attack and damage areas that we've built so that we can build something like this dummy that can take damage. And you can see that it's utilizing audio and visual systems that we've built. We'll also build a generic breakable object type scene that we can use for something like these crates, and even by the end of the video, show how you can make a piece of wall that's destructible for, hidden areas in your game and other things like that. Hi, my name is Michael. Join me as we build an epic Metroidvania game in Godot 4 using GD script. This is the Metroidvania Forge. All right, so welcome. As we work on this today, what we're going to be covering is not only the new breakable functionality that was demoed there in the intro, but as I mentioned, we're going to be utilizing existing systems that we've built. And so you can see this test dummy that we're going to build. He's got some things built in, like he's got an array of hit particles, so we can determine like what particles should fly out when he gets damaged, So you can see I've got some hit particle settings assigned here, and you can see we've got multiple, so there's two. We're using our existing damage area node that we built. And on top of that, the wooden crates and the wall are going to use a new node type that we're going to build. It's this new breakable node, which is a lot like the damage area, except it doesn't receive damage. It more determines what happens when damage is received. So you can see that this crate consists of the breakable node, a damage area as a child, as well as the sprite, a static body so that we can stand on it. But you can see as we look at this breakable script, we've got things here like an emission offset, so we can move where those particles offset, the array of particles when it gets hit or when it's destroyed, those will be separated out, as well as some audio so that it can have unique audio for a hit as opposed to being broken and destroyed. All right, so those are the systems and those are the things that we're going to utilize and integrate. Obviously, behind the scenes, there's some things happening like using our audio manager and our visual effects manager scripts so that we can generate those, audio and visual effects on screen and in your ear holes. And then, just utilizing the existing node types that we've built. So if you're new and you haven't seen how we built any of these things, then you might want to jump back either to last chapter or to the beginning of this chapter where we build, the visual effects and the damage and attack areas. Otherwise, if you've been following along, then let's go ahead and jump in. Now, before we get into this next bit, I want to review some of the bugs that we had from last time, and these were kind of small, but definitely things we want to correct. So the first item is that if you jump and attack, then you can sometimes, if you spam the jump key, you can jump again, or you get some floaty weird behavior, right? So you see how that happened? It's like a double jump that's not intended. So let's fix that first. And really, the issue is fairly straightforward here, but what's happening is when we enter the fall state, if we look at our fall state script, then we've got this condition in here where we check or set our coyote timer, right? Because essentially what we're getting is we're getting a coyote time jump if we're spamming that jump button quick enough, right? And the reason we're getting the coyote time jump is because our previous state was not jump, so it sets the coyote timer. And so what we can do is we can just add this little or to our condition here. So here in the jumps or the falls enter function, we can say if the previous state is attack. Now there's one other thing that we have to do for this to work though, because actually when we leave the attack state, we're setting our next state to idle. So what happens is you jump, you attack, and then you're going to fall, but instead you enter the idle state first briefly. So what we're going to do is replace this in our attack state. We're going to replace this line of code on my line 73. It's in the end attack function. Instead of just saying the next state is idle, we want to add yet another conditional statement here. And we're going to just say if we're on the floor, it's idle, otherwise it's fall. Okay, so this will then allow it to go directly from the attack state into the fall state, and then this condition will pass, or we'll check and it'll say, oh yeah, we were just attacking, let's get rid of that coyote timer. So once we make those two adjustments and run the game again, we should see the double jump issue fixed. Let's see, let me try and yeah, there we go. Now there's still a little bit of a floatiness that you can see. Like now I can, and this is not related to the attack as much, but you can see there's a weird little bit of janky floatiness if I'm spamming the jump button. So what that is caused by is from our change where we moved our player's velocity script from the beginning of the fall into our player script. Now, one of my astute watchers had already come up with a solution where they just made sure that they had the same velocity change condition that this used to be part of the jump state, I guess. So when we would release the jump button, I think this is where this was previously, right? Then what we did is we first multiplied the velocity by half and then returned the fall state. And I moved that into the player. And what they opted to do is keep it in the fall or in the jump state, but just add it to the attack state. I'm going to keep it here in the player. I'm just going to add this little bit to the condition. So if we release the jump button and our velocity is upward, it's less than 0, then we need to multiply the velocity. Otherwise, we can just leave it alone. And that should do the trick for me. Yeah, there we go. Now I can't spam and get that weird float jump, okay? So 2 quick fixes to the code for those of you who are following along. Okay, so let's start dressing up our playground scene. The work that we're going to be doing here is not going to be adding a new state to our player, but rather we want some things in the world so that we can start testing our states. And so we need to be able to have some things to attack and whatnot. And so the first thing I want to do here is I want to build a test dummy that we can hit in our level, right? So something that you might see in a practice area of a game or something like that. So this will be a little bit fun. It's enemy-like, and it's going to show us how we can kind of start integrating the various systems we've built and connecting them up without having to add enemy AI or anything like that. So first thing is let's go ahead and add this new scene that we're going to use for this little test dummy. And you can add this under general. I'm going to go under levels, and I'm going to create, well, I've got a props folder already in here, and I'm just going to create a new folder underneath props, and I'm going to just call it dummies maybe, or let's just call it test dummy. And then we'll create a new scene here. And I'm going to put this in its own folder because it's going to have its own script attached. And in a subsequent video, we'll be creating another kind of a spin-off of this dummy. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new scene in here. We'll just call it test dummy as well. Okay. And it's just a 2D scene. That's great. So the origin here, this is the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and while we're here, I'm just going to attach a script. Call it good. And because I'm not going to use this too extensively, I don't need to give it a class name, although you could if you want to. But now that we've got this set up, let's go ahead and add some of the basics that we're going to need. So we're going to need some sprites in here to display it, and then we're going to need a damage area. So let's first add the damage area because that's simple. Okay, and then we'll have to configure it later. But the damage area is one of these new node types that we've created. It's just a specialized area 2D. So it also requires, of course, that collision shape 2D as a child. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new rectangle shape for this. Okay. We'll come back and adjust that, but I'm going to select my root node again. And this time I'm going to add a sprite 2D. And we're going to have 2. I'm going to call this one the base sprite. And let's go ahead and get the textures that we need for this. Now, we already brought these into our general sprites folder, I believe. Previously, it should be the props destructible, okay? So if you haven't done that, then you can go to my itch.io page, download the zip file for this chapter, which is chapter 4, and then grab this. So I'm going to take this props little guy over here and drag it on so you can see it. So you can see we've got various pieces. So what our dummy is going to consist of is the base. So that's what this base sprite will display. And then we're going to have the dummy itself, or the main sprite, the body sprite. Okay. And you can see we've got a spiked variant that we will build later. But right now, let's add the base and then the body. So the base sprite, in order to configure this, of course, we need to use a texture atlas. So I'm going to just clear that texture out. Say new atlas texture. Now in here is where we can assign this texture. And then we'll just go in and edit the region and just draw a box just around this base here, okay? And the positioning isn't like ultra critical, but it's useful to get it right? So I'm going to just select it just like that, say close. There we go. Now you can see that this is centered horizontally. Let's just go ahead and drag the base up so that it's, starting at the origin there. Now let's duplicate this base sprite. And we're going to go ahead and take this texture atlas here, and we're going to say make unique. Now we can change the region without affecting the base, okay? And so this one will be the body. And you can see as we draw it, it's already showing that in the display there. Make sure that we've got the bottom of that base all the way and just drag these edges to the left and right of our dummy, and voila. Okay, so there we go. So I'm going to rename this base sprite 2 to body sprite. And I'm also going to drag it above the base sprite in the stacking order. Here, let's do this. Let's move this one down. And I'm using control and the arrow keys actually right now. Move that one up. That way it's behind. And then I can just turn off the visibility of that if I don't want to see it. So I can take this body sprite now and I'm just going to drag it so that it lines up with, you can see the bottom line here is going to line up maybe with the second pixel down on the base. Okay. There we go. Now we've got a little test dummy that we can hit. Now, if we reveal this collision shape again, I'm going to just go ahead and drag this up and resize it a little bit so that it more or less fits the size and shape of our test dummy. Obviously, the areas that we want to hit, right? There we go. Pretty straightforward. We've set this up. Now let's go ahead and configure it so that it works. I'm going to go ahead and just change this debug color real quick though, so that it's got a border but no fill. I just don't like the fill covering up my sprite there. Okay, so first step, setting up these. Make sure you've got your things configured in a similar fashion. Now you shouldn't need to configure anything too special, although let's go back to our body sprite. I do want to change this, I think, because what we're going to do is we're going to add a script so that when we hit it, we can make him wobble. But if we wobble him currently by rotating, which is the simple way, you can see he's going to rotate right here on his center, okay? But that's not good. We want him to rotate based off the bottom of his sprite. So we can adjust that by coming to our sprite here and coming to offset. So let's just go ahead and minimize this texture. You can see under Sprite 2D underneath texture, there's the offset. And right now it's set to centered, which is fine. We'll just give it a negative offset on the Y axis here so that it'll bump it up. So it should be about -19 depending on how you drew your box. In fact, it's exactly -19 for me if you have that region directly around the sprite. So now that I've done that, I can just drag this back down to where it was. And there we go. Okay, so now you'll see the difference here when I select the rotate tool and move it. Now if we rotate this, it'll go, that's what we're going to do. We're going to animate it like this when we hit it. Okay, so make sure yours are all set up the same way as mine, and we'll be ready for the next step. Okay, I want to go as quickly as I can through the script on this one. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that we can respond when our player attacks that damage area, right? So we've already set up the code for that previously, and if you don't have that and need to go back to previous episodes, then you can do so. Just look for them in this series. And then we'll just give it some values so that we can tell it like how much to wobble and things like that. And we'll use a simple tween to wobble it to make it animate so that we don't have to build an animation. The tween's a little bit better because it's more responsive and more dynamic, so we can have it change depending on variables and timing and things like that. But I also want to integrate some of the other things we've done in the past, like hit particles. So we've added the ability to have hit particles, and I've defined those. I've defined some presets for myself, and I think you probably have as well. So if I look at my global visual effects, I've got some hit particle settings. So we'll use some of those. This is going to be a real use case of kind of combining and mashing our systems together to see what we can do. So let's start by exporting and setting up the variables for this script. First, export variables is where I generally like to start. So let's add the hit particle settings. So I'll just call that particles. And this is going to be, I'm going to say it's an array of hit particles. And an array because I want to be able to add many types of particles if I want to, right? So this is an example of how we can do that. In the past, when we tested this, we always just did one particle at a time. So we'll just say this is an array of hit particle settings, just like that. And then I'm going to export some variables that we can play with that are just fun, but we don't necessarily need them. And I'm going to have a base, wobble, angle, which this will be a float. And I'm going to go ahead and just set this equal to 4 for now. And we'll export one other variable here. Our wobble speed, also a float. And 0.1. I don't know if speed or duration is the best term for that, but I'm going to call it wobble speed. And then we're going to have a couple values that we can use. We don't want it to wobble forever, so we'll have a wobble count. That'll help us. I should call it variable first. It'll help us know how many times we want it to wobble and how many times it has wobbled. So this is an integer, it'll be equal to 0 by default. And we'll want a way to keep track of our tween when it is wobbling. Okay. This is of type tween. Now let's go ahead and grab a reference to our body sprite that we'll have to rotate to animate it. And we'll take this damage area as well. Okay. So those are all the variables we need to set this up. And of course you can expand and build upon this if you want. But I think you're going to see, well, the obvious thing we want to do first is connect to this damage area. Quick refresher. It has a damage taken signal, which will pass along the attack area that hit it. Okay, so what we'll do here is we'll just create that connection. So we're going to say damage area dot damage taken dot connect. And then we'll just need to create, obviously, a function to handle this. And I like to just name it after the signal. So on damage taken. And I used to come up with different names, and then, over time, I just realized that's ridiculous. I'm going to get rid of the process. We don't really need a process function here. So on damage taken. Now this, of course, it emits that damage area. So I'm going to go ahead and just put that in here, or the attack area. And I'm going to give it an underscore because, oh no, I think we will use it. I'll just call it attack area. It is of type attack area. Okay, so that argument will be passed in by that signal. Okay, so we can just start by doing a simple print just to test it. And we'll just say hit by, and then we'll give it the attack area name just to see if this is working. Okay, obviously I haven't added a test dummy to my playground yet, so I want to do that. I'm going to just come in here, maybe in my props folder. Let me do a Shift Control A. Search for test dummy. And where is he? There he is. Okay. We'll just drag him right over here, stick him on the floor, and let's go ahead and run the project and see what happens. Not much should happen, but I should be able to hit him. Okay. And hopefully it said, oh, I'm not seeing the print message. So what that tells me is we didn't finish configuring our test dummy. Let's just check this damage area. And this is something that I forgot because I'm trying to go quick, I guess, but the collision needs to be set up. This needs to be on a layer that the attack area can hit. So I'm going to put it on breakable. Okay. You could put it on enemy as well, actually. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's see if that works. Okay. Yeah, there we go. It's hitting it. You can see that now. Every time I attack it, it's printing a little message. Okay, good. So that means our script is working. Now we just need to make it do something interesting. And here's what we'll do. We're first going to detect some directionality. So which way did it get hit from, the left or the right, essentially. So we'll just make a variable that we'll call dir. And this will be a float. And I'm going to just set it equal to 1.0 at the beginning here. And then we'll do a check if our attack area dot global position dot x, right? So if the x coordinate of the attack area, in this case, if it's greater than our x position, so we'll say greater than, and then we can say global position dot x. Okay, that means, right? If we're looking at our playground scene here, if the x is greater than, then it means that we're to the right, and so that should swing to the left is essentially what we're doing here. Okay, so we'll just do that check, and if so, then our direction equals -1. There are other ways you could write this, but this is a good easy way for beginners, so I'll stick with it. We also want to spawn the particles, right? And we want a position for that. We could just use our global position, but because of the way we've set this up, the global position of our dummy is right here, so we want it to just be moved up. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll calculate that position here. We'll just say variable POS, which is a vector2, will be equal to our global position. And then what we'll do is we'll just add a vector2 to it. Okay, so that means whatever our global position is, add 0 onto the X, and we'll just say like -30 onto the Y. Okay. Of course, you could leave that as +30 and do subtract. I don't know. Same difference. Okay. Then here's what we're going to do. Because we have a potential for more than one particle, we'll loop through all of our particles. So we'll say for P in particles. Oh my gosh. I cannot type. Now we just need to instantiate each of those, but that's really easy because we've already built our visual effects system. And so we'll just use that. So we'll just say visual effects dot, and then we're going to say hit particles. Let's see. I don't know if I see it in there. Yeah, there it is. Okay. And what we need to do is we need to pass in the position, direction, and the settings that we want for the particles. Okay. So we go position, and then we've got a direction. We just calculated these, which actually that needs to be a vector too, though. So I can't just pass in the direction. That's we just calculated an X direction, but we'll just use the X coordinate as the direction here as our X coordinate, and then 0 is the Y. Okay. You could try and make that more advanced calculation if you want so that it can go up and down. I'm just going to make it go left and right. And then we pass in P because each of these P in particles is a particle setting object. Okay. So this way we should be able to hit it and spawn some particles. So let's go ahead and assign some particles to our test dummy so that we can see it working. So I'm going to give this, let's start with just one. And I'm going to click open here and just find the small wood particles. And let's run it. So we should be able to see particles flying from it. Ooh. A little bit of a hiccup. That's because it was compiling the particles for the first time. Okay, but there we go. If I'm on the left or the right, then they fly in that direction. Okay. So far, so good. Let's add one more particle effect to show you how easy this is. So now I'll just click open and we'll get the hit wood medium. I'm going to go ahead and save that. So now we should see 2 types of particles flying out from the dummy. Boom, there we go. I hope you can see that. There's the bigger ones and the littler ones. Okay, perfect. Okay, so the particles working, they're directional. The last thing that we need to do maybe is to make it wobble. Now, another thing we also could do is make sure that we're playing an audio sound effect. Let me look at my damage area. We do have damage, or the ability for our damage area to play audio. So we could just simply go to our dummy scene here and make sure that we assign one. And I think I'll just use the general hit audio. So let's do that real quick before we move on so that it sounds a little bit better, because obviously our swoosh has one sound, but we want both the swoosh and the hit. Okay, there we go. A lot more satisfying already. So let's go back into our script and then we'll build this wobble, which is going to be a tween. Now, how I'm going to do this is we're going to make a tween that's recurring, that's I can't think of the word I want right now, but it's going to call itself, right? So if you guys will remember it, I've got kind of flu brain. I had the flu all week last week. That's why there's been a delay in videos. But what we're going to do is I'm going to call the wobble effect function that will create the tween. And then when it finishes, it's going to do another wobble with smaller magnitude until we have no more wobbles to do. And how we'll control that is we'll start by setting our wobble count equal to however many we want. I'm going to say 5. You can change this. You could even export a variable for this. And then we'll call this, we'll just call this wobble function that we're going to create. And it's going to need the direction because we do need to know which way to make it start, left or right. So we'll pass in the direction. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in this function right here and we'll just talk through it real quick. And then you guys can copy it. So let me go ahead and just minimize this. Okay, so here we go. The wobble function takes in our direction. First, we'll check our tween. Remember, we are storing our tween here because if we have one, so let's say it's like mid wobble and the player hits it again, then we just want to cancel and just start over. So that's what this will do. If there's already a tween happening, if it's already wobbling, then we'll kill it. And then we'll create a new tween. This easing and the transition type are important, and I'll show you why. Let's go ahead and turn them off to begin with. And then we're going to tween the body sprite, the rotation degrees property. We're going to tween it to the wobble angle times the wobble count times the direction. So that means at first we're going to have a wobble count of 5. The wobble angle is 4, so that's going to be 9. And then the direction is going to make it left or right, positive or negative. And then we just do it for a duration of the wobble speed times 0.05. And then, oh, look at this. I don't need that there. That should already be in the line above. We're probably going to want to change this to ease in out. But anyways, okay, so we're going to create that tween. And then what we're going to do is it says while wobble count is greater than 0, we're going to multiply the direction by -1, subtract a wobble count, and create another tween. And now you'll notice that this tween is basically the same. So here the wobble speed is going to be a lot faster on the first hit, and then these ones are going to be all the same speed. It's going to be the base speed down here or up here, 0.1 second. You could change that if you want it to be really slow wobbly. Okay, but essentially we're just alternating the direction, decreasing the wobble count, and then just creating new tweens. Now, because we're creating these tweens in sequence right here, what it's going to do is it's going to queue them up. So we're going to have a series of 5 tweens that are just going to be lined up, and they'll play one after another, and they'll get smaller each time because the wobble count decreases. So that means that this part where we calculate the angle is also going to decrease. All right. Now the last of these also should have an angle of 0, so it should end pointing straight back up. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this and see if it works. It should work. There we go. See it wobble in there? Now for fun, if we were to go back here and look at like in our playground, we could just select this test dummy and we could set the wobble angle to like 10 and increase the wobble speed to like a whole 1. Let's save that and go back. So now it's taking 1 second per wobble and it's wobbling a large amount, right? Which is kind of stupid, but I just wanted to demonstrate. You could keep the value high, but take the speed back down so it's very quick. Boing. Okay, there you go. So just play around with that, get something you like. I'm going to keep my defaults on there, but that's how we're going to build our little test dummy. So now you've got something fun to hit. We're going to build off of this again in the future video where we will have a spike version of this, but we'll do that when we're ready to hurt the player because we don't have a state to damage the player just yet. So I think it's not useful to add that, but it'll be quick to add once we have it because it'll just be an extended version of this. Forgot to remove the comment on these tweens, and it's not going to be super obvious unless we slow this down. So I'm going to go ahead and select my test dummy and give it a slower wobble speed maybe. And let's just see what happens here. Okay, so that tween, that easing in the tween is going to make it smoother, but I'm going to reset that so it's quick again. Anyways, there we go. You can see I actually had to come back and record this. I was in the middle of doing this crate thing, which you'll get to in a moment. So there we go. That's how you can kind of bring these different features together, right? You can imagine if this were an enemy, you could also track the hit points in his script, and then eventually he would get destroyed once he ran out of hit points, and you could play a new animation and a new sound effect and so forth. But what I want to do next is look at how we can take these similar concepts and build a generic breakable node that'll make it easy for us to create props that are breakable, okay? So let's begin by creating this, and I'm going to make a generic script again. So I'm going to go to my general folder and find, let's see, scripts right here, and we'll right-click, create a new script, and this will be called Breakable. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and add a few things. I want this to be a tool script so that we can at least add a configuration warning, and I want to give it an icon so that it's obvious and easy to notice in my scene tree. So if you look at the icons that we brought in for this chapter, there's a breakable icon. We'll just bring that in here. And what this node type is going to do is it's going to become a generic type of node that we know we can give it like a hit point value and maybe assign it some particles, and then it'll be able to keep track of how much damage it's received and eventually be destroyed. Okay, so this is very similar to how enemies will work in many regards, but this is going to be used strictly for props and things that are kind of static objects in the world, like a crate or a barrel that we'll have in our asset pack here, right? The ones that we can just create from what I've provided. So I'm going to give this a class name, and just call it breakable. Okay. Now, what does this node and script need to do? It needs a signal so that other items can recognize when it has been destroyed. Now, this is going to be really beneficial for times when you might need other things to respond to this in the game world. We're also going to want to give it an export variable for our hit points. And I always forget to put variable, don't I? So this is a float, and I'm going to just set it equal to 10 by default. 10 is actually a lot. Let's put it equal to 3. And then I'm going to give it another variable here. Oops, at export. And this one I'm going to call just fixed hit count. And what this is going to be used for is, let's say you have damage that increases throughout the game, and you want something to always take 2 hits to destroy, even if you can do 500 damage, right? So that's what this variable will be used for. And we'll just set that up. By default, though, I think it'll be false. And if you don't want this, you can omit this and the related code that we'll add in the episode here. And then we want to export some particle settings. And so I'm going to export first a category, which is just going to give us that nice label in the inspector. And we'll just give it a label of particles. Now, there's going to be 3 types of particle settings, and I'm going to just put them in here real quick. Here we've got the emission offset, which is going to be a vector 2, so like a position offset for the particle emission. So that just like in our test dummy, where we needed these, we calculate this position, we had to move it up. This is the offset, right? So the offset from the origin or center of the object where we need to spawn particles. And then we've got an array of hit particles, and we're going to have an array of destroy particles. It's the same thing. We're just kind of separating the 2 types. So like when you hit it, you can have it maybe one type of particle, and when you destroy it, maybe you want a different type of particle, right? And then we should also give it some audio settings. So I'm going to give it another export section. We'll give it another category here that we'll just call audio. And then I'm going to export some variables, but I'm also going to give them a default. Okay, so I'm going to just say, we can say like export variable equals, not equal, export variable hit audio, which all of these, of course, are audio streams. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set it equal to, and I'm just going to drag in and preload one of the sound effects that I want. So in this case, I want that hit sound effect. So I'm just going to grab hit and hold control. There we go. I'm going to copy this, paste it. Now this other audio I'm going to call destroy audio. Okay, so what does it play when it gets destroyed? But I'm going to give it a different sound effect, of course. And I have this break wood. I'm going to use that. Okay, there we go. So these are all the variables that we need to set up as we start building this script, okay? Make sure you've got those. Make sure you've got all of this in there, and then you're ready to continue. Okay, so you're probably wondering, how is this breakable going to work? It's going to work in a similar fashion to our damage area and our attack areas, where we can just add a node of this type, okay? But then it needs to be configured appropriately. And one thing that this breakable node is going to require is that it have a damage area. Otherwise, how do we know if it's being hit by the player or an enemy, right? And so the first thing I think we'll do, we can set up our ready function to be able to detect that area, but we also need to build in functionality so that we can tell the user if they forgot to assign one. But let's go ahead and do the ready function because that's quick. And because this is a tool script, we do need to add our if engine is editor hint, okay? And if it is, we'll return. That way we don't accidentally do stuff in the editor that we don't intend to. Then what we'll do is we will loop over our children. And we're going to just look for our damage area, okay? And if it doesn't have a damage area, it's just not going to work, but it won't break. So we'll just say if C is damage area, then what we can do is we'll connect to that damage area's damage taken signal, right? Because again, we just used this already, but we've got a damage taken signal. So we'll just say C dot damage taken dot connect And then we'll need to build an onDamageTaken function. Now this onDamageTaken function is going to look just like our test dummy, at least right here. So I'm going to just copy that bit of code just to save some time. You know what? I don't know if that saved any time. Again, I don't need the process function on this one. So I'll just add my onDamageTaken, and there we go. Now, the other thing I mentioned we want to do as we get started is make sure that we can detect if we've added a damage area from the inspector, okay? So that we can help ourselves out to know that if we've missed it, haven't configured this properly, that it's not going to work, right? So we'll do a get configurations warning. We've used this in the past. Get configuration warnings, okay? And we're gonna add a check for damage area function. So I'm just going to call that right now, pretend like I've already written it. If check for damage area equals false. Okay, so if we don't have any damage areas, then we will return a message that says something like requires a damage area to work. Requires a damage area node. There we go. Otherwise, we can just do an else here, and we can just return an empty array, okay? But of course, giving us a little bit of a warning because we don't have that function. So let's create it real quick. Now, obviously, if we're checking if this is true or false, then we should make sure that we return a Boolean, okay? And by default, this will return false. So now if I save this and let's go to our playground here and let's just drop in. I'm going to go ahead to my props and just do a Control A and add a breakable script node. And you can see it's got our configuration warning, requires a damage area node. Okay. It's not going to be able to return true yet. So let's add that. We'll say for C and get children. If C is damage area, then we can return true. My goodness. So it's just going to look for the first one. We shouldn't be adding multiple damage areas. We should just use one. If you need a damage area with multiple pieces, you can still just have one damage area that has multiple collision shapes and it should work. All right. So there we go. Now we have the ability to detect this. Let's go ahead and add the damage area now to this breakable. Okay. And of course the breakable is like, hey, I need a collision shape. So we'll add the collision shape. And the collision shape needs configured. Everything is so needy. Jeez Louise. Now, where is this guy? It's up here in the top left, I'm sure. Whoop. Oh, you know what's funny, though? Did we make this extend node? Let's make it extend a node 2D. How about that? That's going to be better. Because we want it to be able to be positioned. That was a pretty critical thing that we didn't do at the beginning. But I just noticed here by the default icon it's assigning. Let me delete this and let's add one of those again real quick. Breakable. There we go. Now it's got the little blue thing and I can move it. Okay. So I'm just going to add my stuff back real quick. Boing. There we go. Now we've got a breakable object that we can add to our world. I'm going to go ahead and clean this up a tiny bit before we move forward. So I don't need this test area. We don't really need this one anymore either because now we've got this little dummy that we can use and hit. And, oh, that's funny. I think I left a little bit behind. Boink. Boink. Just cleaning this up a little bit. Okay, so here's our breakable. We're going to need to add something here. So we could add like a sprite 2D. For now, it can be anything. So I'm going to go ahead and just open this and turn on region, edit the region, and we'll just give it this crate. Okay. Yeah, it looks like I got it pretty good there. There we go. So now we've got a basic breakable object. And before we go any further, I'm going to restart my project so that my icon shows up in the scene tree. All right, there we go. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and just see what happens. We've got a damage area. It doesn't have any audio assigned. Let's just see what happens here. I don't think anything's really going to happen, right? Because we haven't set up a lot of stuff. But this needs to become something that we can destroy. So let's go back into our breakable script. And now it shows up nicely in the scene tree. And we'll finish setting this up. Now, we've created a non-damage taken function. And we have a lot of the other stuff that we need here. Like we've got the ability to make sure we have a damage area. Really all we need to do now is just make this happen, right? This on damage taken function. So let's just start by, we'll do the following. We know that we have hit points, or we have the ability for it to be a fixed hit count. So I'm going to do a check. If it's hit, or if it's, let's see, fixed hit count, then what we'll do is we'll just say HP minus equals 1 because it got hit once. Else, what we can do is HP minus equals, and in this case, we want our attack area's damage value. Okay? Okay, now, we can do some similar things like we did with our dummy. We want to calculate like a position for our particles and a directionality for the particles, and then we want to be able to spawn those particle effects. Okay, so what that will look like is this. And what we're doing here is essentially the same thing we just did, but instead of adding a random vector2, we're going to add the emission offset export variable that we've got right here, okay? So, I mean, we are adding a vector2, we're just not creating it right here. We're grabbing it from that export variable. Now, once we've calculated and set up those two values, then we can start using them. So we also need to have one other branching condition here. So if our HP is greater than 0, then this is where we'll do the normal hit effects, okay? So we can say, we can start with our audio dot play spatial sound, and then we'll just pass in our, is it hit audio? And we can pass in the position. Okay, the position that will display the particles is the same spot where we'll make the audio happen. And then we'll go over, we'll just iterate. It's going to be just like, in fact, if we just look at our test dummy, how we did this here. Boom, I'm just going to copy that, go to our breakable. And I don't know why I was typing variable. We just want this for loop. Except instead of calling it particles, we called it hit particles because we have two types. So for P and hit particles, we'll go through and we'll just create each of these. This direction here, we're actually calculating it as a vector2 in this case. So yeah, we'll just pass that in as a direction. Okay. We could have done this, I guess, over in the test dummy. Okay, there we go. So when we hit it, that's what we need to do. Let's go ahead and take this crate here and let's configure it so that the breakable has some stuff set up. Obviously, you could put audio on the hit area, but because this is a breakable, it's going to have its own audio, and it's already got a hit and a break assigned, so we don't need to change those. But let's give it some hit particles. Let's maybe say it only has one type of hit particle when you hit it, and I'm just going to do quick load. We'll do the hit wood medium. How about that? Oops. Okay. And then let's go ahead and configure the destroy particles. And let's say it has all three. I don't know. So let's just do a quick load for medium. We'll do the small and we'll do the large. Okay. All three will spawn when we hit it or when we destroy it. Now we haven't programmed the destroy yet, but let's just make sure that we can hit it here. So if I hit F5, not working so good, is it? Okay, let's take a look. Let's take a look at this. Yeah, there is an area there. I'm having the same problem I had before, aren't I? This damage area, let's change the collision. We can take the mask off, and we just need to put it on our breakable area, okay? Get it right, Mike, come on. Okay, here we go. There we go. Okay, you can see it's doing the medium things, but now I hit it twice or three times, and now it's not doing anything, because what's happened is we already broke through this hit point condition, right? Where our hit points are now less than or equal to 0. So let's go ahead and build that else, okay? Because if they're not greater than 0, then that means this thing needs to get destroyed. So what we'll do, and one thing actually I really want to focus on here that's really important. We could just queue free this, right? This is something that we're going to want to do. And you'll notice that, let's just test that. Boom, okay? Third hit, it disappeared. What's really nice about how we've built our effects systems and our visual effects systems and audio is that if we were playing audio as a child of this node and we tried to destroy it right away, then it would cut off and it would destroy the particles and the audio effects. So, but the fact that we're already having it played by a global manager means that those will play regardless of the status of this scene. So let's go ahead and kind of copy these here. We're basically going to be doing the same code. We're just going to play a different audio, right? It's the destroy audio. And then here, instead of looping over the hit particles, we'll loop over the destroy. Did we call it destroy particles? Yeah, there we go. Okay. So this should already do something when we destroy it. There we go. Different sound, different set of particles. Now, one other thing that I want to point out that we can do with this, though, is we can give this a brief animation. We can even have collision and other things that are part of this breakable object. And so let's give an example of how we can do this and how we can clear those out effectively. But I think I want to start with a simple tween, because this one we can just do right here in line before we queue free it. Let's just have it fade real quick. Now, I know you're going to want to do more than this because this is bare minimum, but let's just create a new tween here. And create tween. And then we're just going to tween, make a tween property, I guess. So tween dot tween property. The object we're going to tween is ourself. The value we're going to tween is going to be our modulate. Okay. And then what we can do is we can just give it a color. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use whatever our current modulate is. So it's going to have a color by default. So whatever color you use to color it, we can plug that in and then we can give it an alpha. So we can say 0. Okay. So what that says is just use the existing color, but overwrite the alpha with 0. And then we just need to give it a duration. So let's say it's like 0.4 seconds. And then what we want is before we queue free it, we want this to at least play back. So we can await the finished signal on this tween. Now it should have a bit of a fade animation when we destroy it. Okay. Not the coolest animation in the world, but this gives you an idea how you can add more to it. Okay, the last thing I want to do is just come in here to this breakable crate that I've created. Now you could, of course, save this as a scene. So I could say, take this, right click, save branches scene. And then we could come back into our levels props folder. And I could save this as, you know, whatever, a crate or whatever we want to call it. I guess a crate is a good word. Crate underscore wooden, wooden. Okay. Now I could just add multiple of these, and obviously I can just duplicate it because it's here. But if I come in and I change the scene tree on any of these, it's going to update all of them. So let's go in here and let's add something to this. And what's nice is this scene was created from a breakable object. And so even in the game world, when we add these wooden crates, it's still got the breakable icon. So they're still identifiable. If I were to add this scene, let's go ahead and find that breakable, what did I call it? Crate underscore wooden. There we go. So if I add one of these, whoop, it's right there, right? Now, the other thing we could, of course, do is if I'm going to save this as a scene, I might want to give it a name. So it's called crate. Too late for these guys. They're probably going to keep their breakable name, but whatever. So one thing I want to do with this, though, is I want to add a static body to them so that I can like jump on top of them or they block me from walking forward. can't walk through them. So the static body, I'm going to go ahead and just, well, yeah, I'm going to add a new collision shape. Let's go ahead and create or add a collision shape to this. And then it'll be a box, of course. And just drag it up so that it's kind of in the middle here so that the player doesn't stand on the very top. And then, of course, make this go all the way down. Okay. So this, and let's see, as I'm looking at this, two things are happening here that are driving me nuts. One is that this sprite is offset. You can see that my static body collision shape is like lining up with the middle of the pixels. That's because it's an odd number of pixels. And so that doesn't play well when you have, let's see, let's go to offset. When it's centered like this, it doesn't work very well. Now, if I turn centered off and move my sprite again, that should look better. Yeah, okay, now you can see that this collision shape is lining up with the edges better. Okay. We need to make sure this static body collision is set to something that makes sense. So ground, yeah, that's good. We can turn off the mask. Okay, so now when we run the game, I can jump on these boxes and maybe not walk through them, except I didn't save my playground. What's going on here? I don't know why it didn't save it when I ran it. Usually it does. There we go. Okay, so I can jump on top of them. Now we're going to have an issue, though, is for a split second when I destroy it, it's still there. And that's not terrible. It's not the worst thing in the world because, you know, it's less than half a second, but it's also not great, right? And maybe you want an animation on something that gets destroyed that's quicker, and you may want the collision shapes to be removed instantly. So we'll just add a quick functionality to our Breakable script that will allow us to remove all of those collision shapes or disable them. So I'm going to create a function. We'll just call it clear collisions. Okay. And what we'll do is we want to call this before we do this tween here. So we'll just call clear collisions once it's been destroyed. Okay. And then that way we can still do animating after that and have the static bodies get disabled. So this is going to be really simple. We'll just do another for loop and just loop over all the children. And then what we'll do is we'll say if C is a static body 2D, then we can queue free it. So C dot queue free. Okay, so then what this will do now is I should be able to destroy this and just instantly start walking through it. All right. Okay, so there we go. Today we built two handy things. We built a breakable and we built the prop. Now I want to show you actually one other thing we can do with this breakable to give you a clue of how you can use it. And then your homework assignment will be to maybe use the barrel art asset that I've got bundled with this and create some more objects, use them to decorate your playground or your levels. But let's suppose we have a section in our room where we want a destructible piece of wall. Now this breakable node is designed to be flexible so that you don't have to create these scenes with it, right? So you saw how we started building this breakable crate even before we saved it as a scene. So I'm going to go ahead and just add something right here. I'm going to take my tile map and let's go to, let's see, tile map, regular tile map layer. That's where my walls are. And what I want to do is I want to start drawing a wall. You'll see what I'm doing here. I'm going to make this real quick. Okay, so we've got a section here. Now I'm going to close off this portion. And I'm going to use, you'll notice in the sprite sheet I've provided there are these broken wall looking things. But I'm not going to put it on this tile map layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another breakable object. Okay. And as a child of this breakable, obviously it needs a damage area. So let's add a damage area node. And I also want to add, before we finish configuring the damage area, I want to add another tile map layer. Oops, not tile map. I kind of wish it would just remove the old tile map if you're, maybe there's an option for that. But then what I'm going to do here is just load my regular tile map tile set. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to draw in some broken walls. Okay. And maybe the floor bit isn't the best, but you can see how this is going to work, right? So we've got this wall here. Okay. And what I can do now is let's go ahead and add to this damage area our collision shape. Okay. And then make it a rectangle. And because I haven't positioned this yet, it's up there in the left corner. You might want to position it sooner. I'm going to go ahead and just move this down in front of my tile map layer so I can see it better. And we'll just drag this over here and make this a little bit larger. Okay. And of course, I also need this to be tall, like so. Okay. Now what this means is I'm going to have this breakable. And remember how we turned on the fixed hit count? I'm going to just set this to 2. I'm going to turn on fixed hit count. Let's go ahead and test this. For emission, for hit particles, I'm going to give it just 1 hit particle. And I don't think I have a good option here. I'm just going to go with maybe the medium wood. I don't know. And you could obviously create your own, right? For destroy particles, let's just add one on here as well. Obviously, I think you're going to want to go through and create some new types. I put that magic blue particle on there. Okay, so now if we run this, we'll have this wall. And because it's got collision built into the tile map, I can't walk through it, but I can hit it. Can I hit it? Gosh dang it, Mike. Same old thing. Okay, maybe this is a flaw with these damage areas. I need to maybe make this automatic. But let's go ahead and put this on breakable layer. Doink. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now I can destroy the wall, and you see because it removes its collision underneath it when it Q frees, now I can walk through, and I've got a little destructible piece of wall. And another thing that's nice is now that we're done really needing to see all of these collision shapes, we can turn that off. We can run this one more time and have a nice clean looking scene where I can destroy objects that I can jump on, interact with, hit the dummy, feel good about that. He's actually really satisfying to hit, and destroy this wall. 2 hits. Boom. All right. Cool. Well, thank you for following along today. I hope you've learned something new about how we're utilizing these various pieces to create, unique types of interactions. Obviously, breakable and destructible objects is a big deal. This should also give you a clue into how we're going to be building enemies in the near future, right? Because they're going to have damage areas and hit points and some of the things that we've essentially done here. But in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to come back and we're going to make it so that we can damage our player. We'll give him a stun state, and as part of that, what we'll do is we'll create a new hazard area type that will attach to a special version of the dummy that has the spikes. So there's the 2 types in the sprite sheet. We'll make the spiked dummy so that you can hit it, but if the player bumps into it, it's going to deal damage to the player. That'll update his hit points bar, deplete his health, and that'll set us up for being able to ultimately kill the player and end his game over, right? But of course, we'll do that. We'll probably do player damage in one video, and then we'll do game over in the next video. All right. So your homework assignment, like I've mentioned, is to build some more destructible objects, maybe build the crate. But if you also want to go and move ahead and try and make the spike version of this dummy, figure out how to make it so that the dummy is configured to hit the player, then by all means, go ahead and do that and see if you can start working on that bit of code. And that'll help you wrap your head more around how these systems work and how we're using them in our project. And you may come up with solutions that are different from how I implement them. And that doesn't mean that your way is right or wrong, or mine is right or wrong either, right? If there's different ways to do everything. So hopefully by experimenting and playing around, you're learning and you're growing your own ability to write and develop code and make your own games. So again, thank you for following along. Go ahead and drop a like on this video if you appreciate the content. And of course, leave any comments that you have for me in the comments section below. And as always, we'll see you next time.